Don't skip this, because what your soulmate discovered about you has completely changed the way they see this connection. For a long time, they have been carrying a question inside their heart. A question they were too afraid to ask you directly. They wanted to know whether your feelings were real. They wanted to know whether your words could be trusted. They wanted to know whether you were truly different from the people who had disappointed them before. So they did something they never told you about. They secretly tested your honesty. You may not have noticed it at the time. The moment may have seemed ordinary to you. Perhaps it looked like a simple conversation, a delayed reply, a strange question, or a sudden change in their behavior. But nothing about it was accidental. They were watching carefully, listening to every word, paying attention to what you said when you believed no one was judging you. And when they finally learned the truth, they broke down in tears. Not because you had lied. Because you had been honest in a way they were not prepared for. Something happened recently that brought all their hidden fears to the surface. They may have heard something about you from another person. They may have seen a message, noticed a detail, or been given information that created doubt in their mind. It was not enough to prove anything. But it was enough to awaken an old wound. Your soulmate has been betrayed before. Perhaps someone promised loyalty and then disappeared. Perhaps someone looked directly into their eyes and lied without hesitation. Maybe they once trusted a person completely, only to discover that the truth had been hidden from them for months or even years. That experience changed them. Now, whenever they begin feeling deeply for someone, fear appears beside the love. They start searching for signs. They question small changes. They prepare themselves for disappointment before disappointment has even arrived. And because their feelings for you have become so intense, their fear has become intense too. You matter enough to hurt them. That is what frightened them. They realized that if you were not being honest, the truth could destroy them emotionally. They knew they could not simply ask you whether you were trustworthy because anyone could say yes. Words alone were no longer enough for them. They wanted proof. So they created a situation. It may have begun with a small piece of information. Something only a few people knew. Something connected to their feelings, their personal life, or a private conversation between the two of you. They told you one version. Then they allowed another version to reach someone else. They wanted to see what would happen. Would you repeat what they had shared? Would you change the story? Would you use their vulnerability to gain attention from other people? Or would you protect what they had trusted you with? At first, they felt guilty for testing you. They knew it was not completely fair. They knew honesty should be built through open communication, not secret experiments. But fear convinced them that this was the only way to know. They told themselves they were only protecting their heart. They told themselves that if you failed the test, it would be better to discover it now rather than later. But beneath all those explanations was a painful truth. They were already expecting you to disappoint them. Not because of anything you had necessarily done. Because disappointment was what they had learned to expect from love. For several days, they watched you differently. They noticed how you responded when someone brought up the subject. They listened when you had the opportunity to expose something private. They waited for the moment when your words would change. But they did not. You remained consistent. You gave the same answer when speaking to them and when speaking to someone else. You did not exaggerate. You did not reveal what was not yours to reveal. You did not twist the truth to make yourself look better. And even when being honest could have made things more difficult for you, you still chose honesty. That was the moment something inside them began to break open. Your soulmate had expected to find a reason to protect themselves from you. Instead, they found a reason to trust you. But the test was not over yet. There was another part. A more personal part. They wanted to know whether you would be honest about your feelings when there was a chance of rejection. So they pulled back. Not completely. Just enough for you to notice. Their replies became shorter. Their energy became colder. They stopped giving you the reassurance you were used to receiving. They wanted to see what you would do. Would you pretend you did not care? Would you begin playing games? Would you try to make them jealous? Would you disappear without explaining anything? They were waiting for a reaction that would confirm their fears. But your response surprised them. You did not create drama. You did not try to punish them. You may have become quieter, but you remained respectful. And when the moment came, you spoke honestly. Perhaps you told them that their distance was confusing you. Perhaps you admitted that you cared but did not want to force anything. Maybe you said you would respect their space, even though the change had hurt you. You did not pretend the situation had no effect on you. But you also did not use your feelings as a weapon. You told the truth with dignity. Your soulmate read your words more than once. They searched for manipulation. They searched for hidden anger. They searched for evidence that you were trying to control them. But all they found was honesty. You had given them the freedom to choose, even though your heart was involved. That affected them deeply. Because people in their past had often confused love with control. They had experienced guilt disguised as affection. They had heard promises that came with conditions. They had been made to feel responsible for someone else's emotions. But you were different. You cared, yet you did not try to own them. You were honest, yet you did not force them to respond in a certain way. You admitted your emotions without turning those emotions into a threat. Your soulmate had never realized how much they needed that kind of love. Still, one final question remained. They needed to know what you would do if telling the truth made you look imperfect. Anyone can be honest when honesty makes them look good. Real honesty appears when there is something to lose. So your soulmate asked you about something from the past. A mistake. A decision. A situation you may not have been proud of. They already knew part of the answer. That was the secret. Someone had told them what happened, but the story they received was incomplete. Your soulmate wanted to hear the truth directly from you. They asked casually. They tried to hide the seriousness behind their tone. But inside, their heart was racing. This was the part of the test that mattered most. You could have denied everything. You could have changed the details. You could have blamed someone else. You could have given them the answer you thought they wanted to hear. For one brief moment, you may have hesitated. Not because you wanted to lie. Because you were afraid of how the truth would change their opinion of you. You knew that being honest could make them step away. You knew they might misunderstand. You knew the truth was not perfect. But you chose to tell it anyway. You admitted what happened. You explained your part without pretending you were completely innocent. You spoke about what you had learned. You did not ask them to ignore your mistakes. You only asked them to understand that you were no longer the same person. Your soulmate remained silent while listening. At first, you may have believed the silence meant judgment. You may have thought you had ruined everything. But on the other side of that silence, something else was happening. They were crying. Quietly. They covered their mouth because they did not want you to hear their breathing change. They looked away from the screen because your honesty had reached a place inside them that had remained wounded for years. You had just been given the perfect opportunity to lie. And you did not take it. You chose the truth, even when the truth could have cost you the connection. That was when they understood something powerful. You were not trying to create a perfect image. You were allowing them to see the real you. The person who had made mistakes. The person who carried regrets. The person who had learned, changed, and become more honest because of what life had taught them. They had spent so much time wondering whether they could trust your love that they had failed to notice the courage it took for you to be vulnerable. The tears came because they felt ashamed. They realized they had judged you through the pain caused by other people. They had placed you inside a test you did not know you were taking. They had expected you to pay for wounds you did not create. And still, you treated them gently. They thought about every moment when you had tried to reassure them. Every time you answered the same question patiently. Every time you noticed their fear and chose not to embarrass them for it. They remembered the times they doubted your intentions. The moments they searched for hidden meanings in simple words. The days when they almost walked away because trusting you felt too dangerous. And now the truth was undeniable. You had been honest. Not only when it was convenient. Not only when they were giving you love in return. You had been honest even while they were distant, suspicious, and emotionally guarded. That broke something inside them. But it was not only pain. It was also relief. For the first time in a long time, your soulmate felt that perhaps they did not have to protect themselves from every person who came close. Maybe love could be safe. Maybe someone could know the truth and still choose to stay. Maybe honesty did not always lead to punishment. These thoughts were unfamiliar to them. They had built their emotional life around survival. They believed that trust must always be earned through struggle. They thought love was something people offered temporarily before revealing who they truly were. But you had shown them a different possibility. Your honesty was not dramatic. It was not performed. It was quiet. Consistent. Real. And that kind of truth frightened them more than a lie would have. A lie would have allowed them to walk away. A lie would have confirmed everything they already believed. A lie would have given them a reason to close their heart and return to the safety of emotional distance. But your honesty removed their excuse. Now they had to face the real problem. The problem was not that you could not be trusted. The problem was that they were afraid to trust anyone. That night, they sat alone and replayed the conversation. They remembered your voice when you admitted the truth. They remembered the pause before you spoke. They remembered the way you accepted responsibility without begging for approval. Your soulmate cried harder. They thought about contacting you immediately. They wanted to confess the entire test. They wanted to apologize. They wanted to say, "I am sorry I doubted you. I am sorry I put you through something without telling you. I am sorry I treated your heart like it had to prove itself." But shame stopped them. How could they admit what they had done? How could they tell you that some of their distance had been planned? How could they explain that they had watched your behavior, questioned your words, and allowed someone else to become part of the test? They were afraid you would feel betrayed. And the truth is, part of you may feel that way when you finally learn everything. Their fear may explain their behavior, but it does not make every choice fair. Your soulmate knows this. They know trust cannot be built through secret tests forever. They know that a healthy connection requires direct questions and honest conversations. They know that by testing you, they may have created the very kind of uncertainty they claim to fear. That realization made them cry too. They did not only discover your honesty. They discovered their own unhealthy pattern. They saw how easily fear could damage something beautiful. They saw that if they continued acting from old wounds, they might eventually push away the person who had given them no real reason to doubt. So they made a decision. They would tell you the truth. Not immediately, perhaps. They needed courage. But they knew the conversation could no longer be avoided. They began writing a message. "I need to tell you something about the way I have been behaving." They stared at the sentence. Then they added more. "You may have noticed that I became distant. You may have felt that I was questioning you. The truth is, I was scared, and instead of being honest about that fear, I tested you." They stopped typing. Their hands were shaking. Seeing the confession written in front of them made the situation feel real. They imagined your response. You could become angry. You could tell them they had crossed a boundary. You could ask why they did not simply trust you. They had no perfect answer. The only honest answer was that they did not know how. They had forgotten what healthy trust felt like. Their past had taught them to search for danger before allowing themselves to feel safe. But you had not created that past. And they finally understood that it was unfair to make you live inside it. They continued writing. "I already knew part of the answer when I asked you about your past. I wanted to see whether you would tell me the truth. You did. You told me everything, including the parts that could have changed the way I saw you. I do not know how to explain what that did to me." Then the tears returned. They wiped the screen because their vision had become blurry. They wanted you to know what happened after the conversation. How they sat down on the floor. How the strength left their body. How years of disappointment came rushing back. They cried for the person they used to be before betrayal made them suspicious. They cried for every time someone had lied to them while asking for trust. They cried because you had done the opposite. You had given them honesty without knowing it was being measured. And they cried because they realized how close they had come to losing you. There were moments when their test became painful for you. They know that now. Perhaps their distance made you question yourself. Maybe you wondered whether you had said something wrong. Maybe you began doubting the connection. You may have blamed yourself for an emotional shift that had nothing to do with your worth. Your soulmate is beginning to understand the damage caused by unspoken fear. They want to correct it. Not with another test. With honesty. They want to sit in front of you and explain where the fear came from. They want to tell you about the betrayal they never completely healed from. They want to admit that your importance triggered the most vulnerable parts of them. They were not suspicious because you meant nothing. They were suspicious because you meant everything. The more they imagined a future with you, the more terrified they became that the future could disappear. So they tried to discover the ending before allowing the story to begin. But love cannot survive if one person is always preparing for betrayal. Eventually, preparation becomes destruction. Your soulmate has finally seen that. They know an apology is necessary. A real apology. Not one filled with excuses. They cannot simply say, "I tested you because I love you." Love does not automatically make secret tests acceptable. They must say, "I allowed fear to control my behavior, and I understand that it may have hurt you." They must give you the freedom to respond honestly. They must be prepared to hear that you need time. They must accept that rebuilding trust may now be their responsibility too. Because while you passed their test, they may have failed yours. Your test was never planned. It was simple. Could they communicate openly? Could they treat your heart with respect? Could they believe your truth without forcing you to prove it repeatedly? They are not sure they passed. That is why their tears carry regret. They have seen your honesty. Now they must show you theirs. They finally finished writing the message. But they did not send it yet. Their finger hovered above the screen. Fear returned. The same fear that had created the test was now trying to stop the confession. It whispered that silence would be safer. It told them you might never discover what happened. It reminded them that admitting the truth could destroy the trust they had just found. But another voice spoke inside them. The voice created by your example. You had chosen honesty when honesty was difficult. Now it was their turn. They looked at your name. They remembered the way you stayed truthful even when you believed the truth could make them leave. And they realized that if they wanted a real connection with you, they had to offer the same courage. So they pressed send. The message is now moving toward you. It contains the confession, the test, the tears, the apology. But there is something else inside it. Something they discovered after speaking to the person who helped them test you. That person revealed a detail your soulmate never expected. A detail proving that your honesty had protected them from a situation they did not even know was unfolding. Someone around them had been deliberately feeding them false information about you. Someone wanted them to doubt you. Someone wanted the connection to end before it could become serious. And the secret test did not only reveal your honesty. It exposed someone else's lie. Your soulmate now knows who was trying to separate you. They know why this person felt threatened by your connection. And what they discovered next made them cry for an entirely different reason. Because the person spreading doubt was someone they trusted completely. Someone who had smiled at you. Someone who had pretended to support the connection. Someone who knew exactly which wound to use against your soulmate. The truth is coming closer. Your honesty has already changed everything. But your soulmate still has one final confession to make. They are no longer only afraid of losing you. They are preparing to protect this connection from the person who has been secretly trying to destroy it. And when you discover who that person is, you will understand why your soulmate is saying one thing with tears in their eyes. Please do not walk away before I tell you everything. The message reached you at a moment when you had almost convinced yourself to stop waiting. You may have been trying to focus on something else. Perhaps you were working, resting, or simply doing your best to move through the day without thinking about them. But the moment their name appeared on your screen, everything inside you became still. Please do not walk away before I tell you everything. You read the sentence once. Then again. There was something different about the way they wrote it. This was not one of their usual messages. It did not feel casual, controlled, or carefully distant. The words carried urgency. They carried fear. And beneath that fear, there was a level of honesty you had been waiting to see for a long time. You opened the rest of the message. Your soulmate confessed that they had tested you. They explained the strange questions, the emotional distance, and the situations that had made you wonder whether something had changed between you. They admitted that some of those moments had not happened naturally. They had been watching your reactions. They had been trying to discover whether your words remained the same when they were not standing directly in front of you. They had been testing whether you would protect their private information. And they admitted that they already knew part of the truth when they asked you about your past. For a few seconds, you did not know what to feel. Part of you understood why they had been afraid. Another part of you felt hurt. You remembered the days when you questioned yourself. The moments when their coldness made you wonder whether you had done something wrong. You remembered trying to stay calm while sensing that they were silently judging every word you spoke. Now you knew that your instincts had been correct. Something had been happening behind the surface. But the confession did not end there. Your soulmate told you that you had been honest every time. They said you had protected what they shared even when repeating it might have gained you attention or sympathy from someone else. They admitted that you had told the truth about your past even when lying would have been easier. Then they wrote the words that changed the energy of the entire message. I broke down after I realized you were telling me the truth. I was so prepared to find a reason not to trust you that I did not know what to do when you proved me wrong. You could feel their pain inside the sentence. But before you could decide how to respond, another confession appeared. Someone had been feeding them false information about you. Someone close to them had deliberately created doubt. At first, your soulmate believed this person was only trying to protect them. The person spoke carefully. They did not attack you directly. Instead, they asked questions. Are you sure you know them as well as you think? What if they are not telling you everything? Have you noticed how they behave when you are not around? The questions sounded like concern. But each one planted a small seed of fear. Your soulmate already carried trust wounds, so the person did not need to create a completely new fear. They only needed to strengthen the fear that was already there. That was what made the manipulation so effective. This person knew your soulmate's history. They knew about the betrayal. They knew how difficult it was for them to trust. They knew exactly what to say to make them question something beautiful before it had a chance to grow. And the worst part was that your soulmate trusted this person deeply. It was someone they had known for years. Someone they spoke to when they felt uncertain. Someone whose opinion had influenced important decisions in their life. The person may have been a close friend, a relative, someone who had always presented themselves as loyal and protective. Your soulmate never imagined that this person might have a hidden reason for wanting the connection to fail. But your honesty exposed the lie. The first piece of evidence appeared when your soulmate compared two conversations. The trusted person claimed you had repeated a private detail. They said someone else had heard it from you. Your soulmate became frightened because the information was personal. It was something they had only told a small number of people. That was when they began the first test. They gave you one version of the story. They gave the trusted person a slightly different version. Then they waited. A few days later, the version that returned to them was not the one they had shared with you. It was the version they had shared with the trusted person. At first, they thought it might be a coincidence. They did not want to believe that someone so close could be responsible. So they tested the situation again. This time, the difference was even clearer. They told you a detail involving a specific place. They told the other person the same story but changed the place. When the rumor returned, it contained the false location given only to the trusted person. That was the moment your soulmate realized you had never betrayed their privacy. Someone else had. And that person had been trying to make it look like you were responsible. Your soulmate felt sick. They thought about every moment they had become cold toward you. Every reply they had delayed. Every time they had looked at your honesty through the lens of someone else's lie. They realized that while you were trying to build trust, the person closest to them was quietly destroying it. That was when they began crying for a second time. The first tears came because you had been honest. The second came because they had almost punished you for a betrayal you never committed. They wanted to call you immediately. They wanted to confess everything. But before they did, they needed to confront the person responsible. They arranged to meet privately. They did not reveal how much they knew. They wanted to hear whether the person would tell the truth without being forced. At first, the conversation seemed normal. The person asked about you. They pretended to be concerned. They said your soulmate had been acting emotionally vulnerable and warned them not to move too quickly. Your soulmate listened quietly. Then they asked one simple question. Why did you tell me that information came from them when I only shared that version with you? The person froze. For a brief moment, their expression changed. The concern disappeared. Something colder appeared in its place. They tried to laugh. They said there must have been a misunderstanding. They claimed they may have heard the details somewhere else. But your soulmate did not allow them to change the subject. They described both tests. They explained the different versions. They revealed that every false rumor matched the information given only to that person. There was no believable explanation left. The person became defensive. They accused your soulmate of choosing you over years of friendship. They said you had changed them. They said this connection was making them reckless, emotional, and blind. But your soulmate heard what was hidden beneath the anger. Jealousy. The person was not simply worried. They felt threatened. Your presence had changed the balance of the relationship between them and your soulmate. Before you arrived, this person held enormous influence. Your soulmate depended on them for advice, emotional support, and reassurance. They were often the first person your soulmate contacted when something went wrong. But after meeting you, your soulmate began turning toward you emotionally. They began sharing thoughts they had once shared only with this trusted person. They began questioning advice they would once have followed without hesitation. The person felt their control weakening. That was why they wanted you removed. They did not necessarily want a romantic relationship with your soulmate. Their attachment was more complicated. They wanted to remain the most important voice in your soulmate's life. They wanted to be needed. They wanted your soulmate to depend on them. And you were teaching your soulmate something dangerous to that control. You were teaching them to trust their own feelings. You were encouraging them to communicate directly. You were showing them that care did not always have to come with fear, guilt, or emotional pressure. The person understood that if your connection became stronger, your soulmate might finally see how unhealthy their dependence had become. So they tried to destroy your credibility. Your soulmate listened as the excuses slowly became confessions. The person admitted they had exaggerated certain things. They admitted they had repeated private information. But they still insisted they had done it for protection. They said they could see your soulmate becoming attached too quickly. They claimed you would eventually hurt them. Your soulmate asked how they could possibly know that. The person had no answer. They did not know you. They only knew that you were becoming important. That was enough to make them feel threatened. Then your soulmate asked the question that ended the friendship as they knew it. Were you hoping I would walk away from them? The person looked down. Their silence answered. Your soulmate felt something inside them break. This was someone they had defended. Someone they had trusted with personal fears. Someone they believed wanted them to be happy. But the truth was that this person only supported happiness they could control. If your soulmate chose a path that reduced their influence, the support disappeared. The confrontation became emotional. The person began crying. They spoke about everything they had done for your soulmate over the years. They reminded them of the difficult moments they had survived together. They used history as evidence that their intentions could not be harmful. But your soulmate understood something important. A long history does not make manipulation acceptable. Past support does not give someone permanent control over your choices. Love, friendship, and loyalty do not require you to surrender your ability to think for yourself. Your soulmate told them the trust had been damaged. They said they needed distance. The person reacted badly. They accused you again. They said you were separating them. But this time, your soulmate defended you. They said, they did not separate us. Your lies did. Those words changed everything. For the first time, they did not allow someone else's fear to define you. They did not remain silent to avoid conflict. They chose the truth, even though it meant losing a relationship that had existed for years. After the confrontation, your soulmate sat alone in their car. Their hands were shaking. The emotional weight of the day became unbearable. They had discovered your honesty. They had discovered someone else's betrayal. And they had discovered something uncomfortable about themselves. They had trusted the wrong voice because it matched their fear. The lies worked because part of them was already looking for danger. They knew they could not blame the other person for every mistake they had made. Yes, they had been manipulated. But they had still chosen to test you instead of speaking to you directly. They had still allowed suspicion to affect the way they treated you. They had still made you feel uncertain. That responsibility belonged to them. They cried because they realized how close they had come to losing a genuine connection. If you had responded with anger during the test, they might have believed the lie. If you had repeated one private detail carelessly, they might have walked away. If you had hidden the truth about your past, they might never have discovered what was happening. But you remained honest. Not perfectly. Not because you never made mistakes. You remained honest because you chose truth even when truth made you vulnerable. Your soulmate understood that this was the quality they had been searching for all along. They wanted someone real. Someone who could admit imperfection. Someone who would not manipulate them with a perfect image. And that was exactly what you had given them. They sat in the car and wrote the confession you were now reading. They did not try to make themselves innocent. They admitted what they had done. They explained the test. They revealed the lies. They told you who had been involved. And then they asked for something they were not sure they deserved. A chance to explain everything face to face. You read the request slowly. Your emotions were complicated. You appreciated the honesty. You understood the influence of old wounds. But you also knew that secret tests could become dangerous in a relationship. Today it was one test. Tomorrow it could become constant suspicion. You did not want a connection where every word had to pass through hidden examinations. You did not want to spend your life proving that you were different from the people who had hurt them. So you responded honestly. What you did hurt me. I understand why you were afraid, but I cannot build something real if I am being tested without knowing it. If we continue, there must be direct communication. Your soulmate read the message immediately. Their chest tightened. They had feared anger, but your calm honesty affected them even more. You were not insulting them. You were not trying to make them feel worthless. You were simply protecting your emotional safety. And they knew you were right. They replied. You should not have to keep proving yourself. I should have asked you directly. I am sorry. But they did not stop with the apology. They asked whether they could speak with you. You agreed, but you set a boundary. One conversation. No excuses. No turning the blame toward the person who manipulated them. You wanted your soulmate to take responsibility for their own choices. When the call began, their voice was unsteady. For several seconds, they could not speak. Then they said your name, and you heard them begin to cry. This time, they did not hide it. They told you that they had been terrified. Not only of being betrayed. They were terrified because your honesty meant the connection was real. As long as they believed you might be lying, they could protect themselves by keeping emotional distance. But once they knew you were trustworthy, they had no excuse left. They had to admit how deeply they cared. They confessed that they had already imagined a future with you. They imagined ordinary mornings. Difficult conversations. Shared responsibilities. They imagined introducing you to the people who mattered. They imagined building a life where they did not have to question every moment of happiness. That future frightened them because they had never allowed themselves to depend emotionally on someone without expecting loss. You listened. Then you asked them something important. Do you trust me now, or are you only emotional because someone else lied? The question forced them to pause. They understood the difference. Discovering someone else's dishonesty did not automatically create trust. Trust would still have to be built between the two of you. They answered carefully. I believe you have been honest with me. But I also know my fear will not disappear in one day. I need to work on it instead of making it your responsibility. That answer mattered. They were finally recognizing that healing was their responsibility. Your love could support them. Your honesty could reassure them. But you could not repair every wound created before you arrived. They had to learn how to communicate fear without creating tests. They had to learn how to ask questions without making accusations. They had to learn that vulnerability was not weakness. The conversation continued for a long time. You told them how their distance affected you. You explained that there were moments when you believed you were not enough. You admitted that you had begun preparing yourself to walk away. Your soulmate cried harder when they heard that. They had focused so much on protecting themselves that they failed to see how deeply you were being affected. They apologized again. But this time, the apology was specific. They apologized for becoming cold. They apologized for allowing someone else's opinion to carry more weight than your consistent behavior. They apologized for asking questions they already knew the answers to. They apologized for making you feel as though your honesty was always under investigation. You did not immediately forgive everything. You told them trust would require time. They accepted that. They did not ask for instant reassurance. They did not say their tears should erase the consequences. They said they were ready to show change through actions. And then they made a promise. No more secret tests. If they felt afraid, they would tell you. If they heard something about you, they would ask you directly. If another person tried to influence the connection, they would not allow rumors to replace conversation. You agreed to observe their actions. Not because you wanted to punish them. Because promises become meaningful only when repeated behavior supports them. The days that followed felt different. Your soulmate began communicating more openly. When fear appeared, they did not disappear. They sent simple messages. I am feeling insecure today, and I do not want that insecurity to turn into distance. The first time they wrote this, they nearly deleted it. But they sent it. You answered honestly. You did not mock them. You did not use their vulnerability against them. You reassured them where reassurance was appropriate, but you also encouraged them to examine whether the fear came from the present or the past. Slowly, they began learning the difference. Not every delay was rejection. Not every change in tone was betrayal. Not every private moment meant something was being hidden. They were learning that trust was not blindness. It was the willingness to seek truth without creating punishment before the truth was known. The person who had manipulated them tried to return. They sent emotional messages. They apologized. They claimed they had acted from love. Your soulmate did not respond immediately. Before, guilt would have made them reopen the door. This time, they showed you the message. Not because they needed permission. Because they wanted transparency. They told the person that forgiveness might be possible one day, but access would not be restored without accountability. They refused to discuss you. They refused to allow your connection to become the subject of further manipulation. That was the first real proof that they had changed. But something unexpected happened after the boundary was set. The person revealed one final secret. They said they had not begun interfering only because they were jealous of losing influence. Someone else had encouraged them. Someone who knew both you and your soulmate. Someone who had provided the original false information. The trusted person had spread the rumors, but they had not created all of them. There was another person behind the situation. Someone who had been observing the connection from a distance. Someone who knew personal details about both of you. Someone who believed that if you and your soulmate became fully honest with each other, a much older truth would be exposed. Your soulmate stared at the message in disbelief. They had believed the confrontation had ended the mystery. But it had only revealed the first layer. The person finally shared a name.